Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mystery in the Ozarks, the book that I'm writing and reading to you as I write it. We're a few episodes in now, so if you haven't been reading from the beginning, I suggest go back and checking out episode 1. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a catch-up here because we haven't done an episode in a while, so I'm going to be leaving some spoilers here in just a second. So if you have not watched yet, go back to episode 1 now and start there. I'll give you a second to leave. Okay, here we go. We're going to do a recap. Enjoy! Oh, and really quick, today's video has a sponsor. It's bookboomalive.com. They handle all sorts of editing, book coaching, writing coaching, anything you can think of to do with the writing or author industry, they'll help you out. Go check them out. It's bookboomalive.com. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to send me a message. I'll help you out. Okay, to recap, The Mystery at the Ozarks is a treasure adventure mystery story. It follows Jake, Will, and Carol, who are from Charleston, Arkansas, and their 3 cousins whose grandfather left them some items when he passed away: a compass, a cipher, and a journal. He told them there was treasure to be found and that they should all look for it together in a note that he left them. They all meet up at Mulberry Mountain Campground to spread his ashes after he passes away. Once there, they learn it might be Jesse James' treasure that they're looking for. Carol is there with her mother Peggy, whose husband passed away in a hunting accident in years past. Mike and Angie are Jake's parents, and Sally and Jim are Will's parents. While they're there to discover a huge clue near the Phipps waterfall, where there's a code on the cement wall behind the waterfall that can only be seen when using the compass as a spotlight. They're starting to try to read the message and use the cipher to decode it when some strangers showed up at the waterfall, and the kids overheard them say that the strangers themselves were looking for the treasure and that their grandfather was looking for it as well. These strangers turn out to be Lisa and Trent, some old high school friends of their parents, who lied to the kids' parents that they are there to celebrate their grandfather's life as well. Nothing about finding treasure. The kids return from the mountain to their parents, who have just caught a large amount of fish, and this is the scene we're coming back into, right? The kids have just returned from the mountain to their parents, who caught a large amount of fish, and they want to have a fish fry in the backyard of the cabin. While they're preparing for the fish fry, Linda and Trent walk by, and Angie notices them and calls them over to chat and catch up. The two, Angie, Jake, Carol, and Will, are sitting around a campfire pit in lawn chairs, with Mike and Jim playing cornhole across the yard. Linda explains that her granddad, Hayden Phipps, is the one the waterfall is named after, and he built the cabin that they are staying in, and that he is famous for being the right-hand man of Jesse James. All right, without further ado, the newest chapter. Here we go. Mystery in the Ozarks, Chapter 11, History Lesson. That makes so much sense! Carol's voice rang out from Jake's right side as the words "right-hand man of Jesse James" fell out of Linda's mouth. He turned to see her face covered with a look of excitement, but also terror that she had said the words out loud and not just in her head. What makes so much sense? Her Aunt Angie asked with some confusion while looking in her direction. Linda also immediately turned and looked at Carol, tense with heightened suspicion. The fact that it's related to Jesse James. She paused quickly, realizing she couldn't say anything about the treasure or her grandfather. She took a deep breath and continued. You see, I wrote a paper on Jesse James for school, and I learned that he and his gang rode all over this area. So it totally makes sense that the guy who built that cabin might have known him. I love cool facts, she said as she finished with a small snort and giggle. Oh, so you like history, Linda said, who was slightly less suspicious now. She also loved to brag on her famous family and would take any chance she could. Yes, ma'am, very much so, Carol replied. Yes, please tell us more about Hayden, Angie added. Okay, well, if you insist, Linda said with a smile. So let's start at the beginning. From what we know, Hayden Phipps was a good friend and a partner in business with Jesse James. They made a great team. It seems Jesse would handle the easy parts of the plan, the shooting and yelling at people, and Hayden was always the mastermind behind all of it. As she finished the sentence, she tossed her hands into the air and looked into the sky as if she could see the memories dancing in the clouds. Oh, interesting, Angie chimed in after a painfully quiet few seconds, with Linda looking off into the horizon. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I get caught up in the story sometimes. You see, even though Hayden was one of Jesse's best friends and a very crucial piece of the gang, Jesse was always the one people remembered. Hayden was known as the brains of the operation, she said as she smiled with pride. He was in charge of all kinds of things that no one else was smart enough to do. But people don't know that much about him because Jesse always took the credit, her brother Trent blurted out in clear frustration. Linda snapped a glance back at Trent and said, Linda snapped a glance back at Trent that said, I'm telling the story, shut up. He quickly changed the look on his face to one of joking and said, what I meant was, what he means is that Hayden and James were friends up until they weren't. Linda piped up, bringing everyone's attention back to her. She continued, like I said, they started as best friends and partners. Grandpa told us the story of when Jesse and Hayden first met. You see, when Hayden was 18, he was working on the railroad and just sort of drifting from town to town looking for work. Back then, there wasn't much to go around and you had to just try to find some where you could. Many young men would take the rails to try to find some work and then send money back to their families. Well, Hayden had ridden the rails all the way up into Missouri and was desperate to find work. Late one evening in a small town called Liberty, two men had heard about Hayden and that he was looking for work. So they found him and offered him a job. The job was so simple, he immediately agreed. All he had to do was a week from that day on February 13th was to pick up 3 horses from the stable in town, charge them to the account from Mr. James, and have them tied up to a specific tree off in the woods a small ways just out of town. The men would then meet him there, and then he could leave and they would pay him $10 whole. Linda said the last part with more excitement and stopped to see the shock in the other's eyes. But no one seemed too impressed with the $10 whole part, so she elaborated. Y'all, $10 was a lot back then. Most people would make $20 in a month's work, so half of that for just moving some horses around. He was thrilled. She looked around again at the others, and this time Angie said, "Oh yeah, no, that would be a lot back then," trying to keep the story moving forward. "Right," Linda said as she continued. So Hayden did exactly what they asked. The next week, he went to the stables and retrieved the horses with no issue. He took them to the spot where he was told to meet them and waited. He was there for about an hour when he heard someone hollering and running in his direction. All of a sudden, gunshots were going off in the distance as well. The 2 men who had hired him came running into view, both carrying a large stuffed grain sack. "Time to go," one of the men yelled at Hayden as they grabbed the reins for the horse and jumped on. Now, Hayden was worried they were going to ride off and not pay him. So he yelled back at him, "Hey, where's my money?" One of the men looked at the other and said, "We don't got time for this. They're right on us. This is not what we planned. What are we going to do with him now and the extra horse?" Pointing towards Hayden and the 3rd horse. The second man thought for a second and then looked down from his horse at Hayden and said, "Son, you got a choice right now. You could either jump on that extra horse and come with us and we'll get you your money, or you can sit here and deal with them." And he pointed behind him to the giant posse of town folks headed their direction, firing at them. What else could he do? So Hayden hopped on the horse and took off with the men into the sunset. Now, Grandpa said they rode for at least a few hours straight without slowing. Once they were able to slow and trot again without being chased, Hayden began asking them questions. Neither man wanted to share too much and told them that if he followed them, that all of his questions would be answered. They rode for another hour or so until they were close to a place recently named Lee's Summit, Missouri. It was there that they made their way onto a small farm that had a small wooden cabin on it. As they rode through the entrance to the farm, there were 2 men at the gate guarding it with guns. When they got to the cabin, there were 2 more men standing in front of the cabin guarding it. They told Hayden to get off his horse, and they all tied their horses up. They motioned for him to head inside the cabin, and as he walked in, he was met by a small-framed, young-looking man, about the same size and similar age to himself. He was sitting at a small wooden table that had 4 wooden chairs around it. Per the journals, Hayden said that he looked a bit like myself, just a little smaller, when referring to the young man in the cabin. The man motioned for Hayden to have a seat at the chair across from him, and the other 2 men joined them at the other 2 seats. The young man looked Hayden up and down and said, "Well, hello there. We seem to have a bit of a predicament here. You see, we just robbed that bank over there in Liberty, and now you helped us. So you don't have a lot of options. You can either join us and we'll cut you in on whatever we make and protect you, or you can leave here with your $10 and protect yourself when the law comes. But if you ever speak a word that you saw us, we will find you and we will end you. Linda paused here again for dramatic effect, and this time it worked. Everyone was silent and waiting for her to continue. She loved it. That's crazy! What did Hayden decide? Aunt Peggy's shrill voice cut in, coming from the cabin. Hi, Linda. Hi, Trent. Good to see y'all. That's right. I've been listening through the cabin window while I grabbed the dips from the fridge, she said as she walked out of the building and sat down in one of the chairs around the fire pit. Oh, hi, Peggy. It's good to see you, Linda added as she smiled politely at Peggy. Sorry. Continue, please, Peggy replied. Okay. Well, Hayden didn't really have a choice. He agreed to join the gang, and from there the rest is history. Every single heist that took place from then until now, every single heist that took place from then until the last one. She slowed here for a quick second, lost in sad thought. Kaboom! Thunder sounded out of nowhere in the distance, making everyone jump. They all looked up to see that the skies had slowly begun to darken. Hey y'all, sorry to interrupt, but it looks like the Weather Channel is showing a storm that's dropping in on us. Mike's voice cut in after the thunder from across the yard at the cornhole boards. We should probably cut all this short as lightning could begin any moment. Crash! Lightning crackled across the sky, slapping into a tree off in the distance. Like that, Mike continued. Okay everyone, I'm sorry, but yeah, we should all head into the cabins and finish the food in there. Trent shot a glance at Linda like, this is our chance to leave this boring thing. Angie looked to Linda and said, y'all are welcome to join us. Kaboom! Another clash of thunder went off, and it began to sprinkle a little rain. Linda, you know what? Angie, you know what? I'm sorry, but I think Trent and I are going to head to our cabin before the rain really starts. Maybe if it clears up later, we can make our way back over and finish this conversation. But it was good to see y'all. She stood up and Trent followed. Angie stood up to give Linda a quick hug, and Linda turned to the kids and Peggy and said, it was nice to meet y'all, but maybe we'll see you out there again. She and Trent quickly turned and headed down the path in the sprinkling rain toward their building. Carol, Jake, and Will were all a little bit in shock at all the information they had just received, and all of them were lost in thought for a few seconds as the rain began to fall. Angie's voice cut into their thoughts. Hey Jake, can you and Will grab the cooler of fish, and Carol, can you grab the potatoes and meet us inside? This snapped them all back to reality, and they each grabbed the requested items and headed into the cabin. Until next time.